You listen to the AZ Wildcats podcast brought to you by DraftKings. Put in $5, you get $150 in free plays if that team plays and if you're a new customer. All right, joined by William Brad Alice. I'm merely Mike Luke. William, how you doing, my man?
Doing well, Mike.
Awesome. All right. I wanted to first and foremost start off. Had a lot of people that wanted me to ask you about the transfer portal and about what you think of it vis-a-vis the recruit from a recruiting angle. Now, a lot of people were wondering what kind of recruiter Tommy Lloyd would be. And, you know, I think when you bring in KJ Lewis, when you get a Kylan Boswell, you can be a little bit more picky as he's been. But with the transfer portal, with Keon Brooks now being out of the equation and looking elsewhere, we'll get to some other names, missing out on a couple other guys. Does that strategy work when it comes to trying to get kids when you're basically speed dating?
You know, I think you got a lot of things. I just went through Jeff Goodman's list of top 100 transfers.
Mm-hmm.
Very few players made the move to better their situation.
Right.
Arkansas did very well. Kentucky had a few. There's a lot of guys making lateral moves, and a lot of guys, when they do leave a smaller team, go to a place where they can get shots.
Right.
There aren't a lot of guys who seem like they're going to win. Now, the exception would be the kid who just wound up at Gonzaga.
Mm-hmm. Malachi
like
Smith.
I said, a couple of the kids who went to Arkansas. But you get a lot of Keon Brooks who go to Washington. Why are you going to Washington? To get shots, to
right.
showcase yourself. Ironically enough, usually the best way to showcase yourself is to go to a really good program and show how you can operate in that structure. The NBA doesn't care if you get 21 shots a game. If they did, Terrell Brown would be a first-round draft pick.
Right.
They want to see how, because unless you're one of the 5 guys in the draft who are stars, and you never know who that guy's going to be.
Right.
You're probably going to have to go play a role in the NBA. But if you look at it, you know, UCLA got hit really hard with defections to the draft. They're not picking up a lot of guys.
Right.
I think Carolina lost way more than they brought in. So I think you're in a hard thing. And then a lot of guys are willing to sacrifice a couple tournament wins for NIL money. And Arizona has some NIL money, but, you know, Miami was able to get Nigel Pack in large part because of NIL deals. So do I think Lloyd has to be better at it? I'd like to see him be better at it this year. He was very good with it last year. He got Ballo. He was always going to get Ballo. But, you know, we saw that the 2 pieces he added,
Hello Larson
and Kyer, were nice pickups, nice pieces that fit in. So now if they get Ramey, if they get the kid from Campbell who was in over the weekend, if they get the kid from Illinois, suddenly we're changing our tune, and that's a very nice mix of players. Ramey's good, but he's not great, so he can accept a role at Arizona, and that might be as a starter, but it might be as the Justin Kyer. The kid from Illinois, likewise, he might fit in the starting lineup, but he just as well could be the first wing off the bench.
You know what surprised? Yeah,
I think that remains to be seen.
You know what surprised me a little bit about the Keon Brooks situation is, I mean, I was just looking at it from an outsider perspective, thinking that, all right, well, Arizona's got this glaring hole at small forward. You want minutes. You want to be able to showcase yourself. Brad, we're not in the time anymore where you needed to average 20 points a game in college to be a first-round pick. I mean, he should know that better than anybody being at Kentucky. I mean, you look up and down that roster. It's guys that are first-round picks that are averaging 13, averaging 12, averaging 11.
The highest draft pick is going to be a kid who didn't play.
Right, precisely. And so at Arizona, when you get 30 minutes, you're going to play in an up-tempo type system. You're going to get your minutes regardless. But I also have come around a little bit to where once Arizona lost Dalen Terry, I think you went from being a national title contender to being more, and we've talked about this, being more of a top 20-ish type team, kind of a transition year. I bring back to 95, 96. When Arizona loses Damon, you lose Rayos, you got Bibby coming in the following year, but you've got a bunch of seniors, this and that. I think the most important thing that Tommy Lloyd wants to do is not upset this roster right here, because so many of these guys could be on the 2023, 2024 roster.
It also makes me wonder, what do they really feel about Adama Ball?
Right.
Because because maybe Keon Brooks is what am I starting? They're like, probably not.
Right.
We love the Ball kid. And we don't know. I mean, Ball showed flashes.
Right.
And, generally, though, when a guy shows flashes, you're pretty, as long as he's patient, you're going to get a pretty good player. So that's part of my wondering what exactly, if they weren't selling Keon Brooks at guaranteed starting. And in fact, we're maybe honest, like, hey, we think Adama Ball's the guy.
Right.
Now, do I think he's Dallin Terry? No, but I think he's probably a better scorer than Terry. I don't know if he can do the intangibles, but I think he's a guy who, if you tell me, guess what? Adama Ball's going to be a 14, 15 point a game guy this year. I could believe it. I don't know that obviously for sure, but that's my guess is maybe they are much higher on Ball. And that's not what Brooks wanted to hear.
Yeah, which is fair enough. So now let's get to some of the other guys. Obviously, we talked a little bit about, and I looked at it a little bit earlier. You got a guy in Cedric Henderson Jr. Is an interesting. Anytime you get somebody that plays at the level at Campbell, you've got to be a little circumspect because, again, you're not playing high-level D1 players. But averages 16 and 6, shot 55% from the field, went over 1,000 points. Seems like a guy who could be a solid role player. I mean, he's not going to come in and average 16 a game. But with guys like that, I never know what to expect, William, because Dylan Smith came in here averaging 17 from UNC Asheville. We know the story with Dylan Smith.
TJ McConnell came in averaging 8 or 9.
Exactly.
And became an all Pac-12 player. And you could argue he was Arizona's MVP his senior year. He seems like a guy, in some ways, I almost say like cut the scoring in half, but if you can keep the rebounding, it's worth it.
Right.
Can he be an 8 and 6 guy? Okay. Sign me up. 8 and 5. Because again, he looks like he would be a role player. And that's really, well, I think you do want a starting guard to come in. I think if you can get 2 role players out of this group, you're probably fine.
Mm-hmm.
Again, if you're telling me your starting lineup is going to be some combination of Tabellis, Bala, or Vesar in the front court,
right,
with Ball, Larson, and Kerr in the backcourt, that's a good team. Now, is it a great team? Is it as good as last year? Probably not, but it's a good team.
Right, for sure.
So then you're telling me, okay, we're filling in the cracks now with, Big Phil and maybe this kid from Campbell and Dylan Anderson. I just need I need a little bit more in case Anderson's not ready to play. I need a little bit more just in case. You really don't have anyone at the guard spot back. You need some depth on the wing and in the back court. But overall, you kind of like what you have because, again, we don't know what Phil's going to be. We don't know what Vesser is going to be. And
that's the thing, too, is
they may need to ride some minutes with that starting front court.
And I tell people this all the time. We're kind of in a new territory right now because Sean Miller recruited a little bit internationally, but outside of a Laurie Markkinen, it was generally domestic. It was Aaron Gordon. It was Stanley Johnson. It was DeAndre Ayton. You're going to see a lot more of a European influence here. No duh. But also, when you look at Lloyd's track record, you look at what he did at Gonzaga. This is a man that knows how to recruit the international game. This isn't somebody that's going over there. And Murph is the same way. These aren't guys that are going over there with no idea what to look for and just looking for anybody that's 6'8" that can make a 3 in warmups.
And honestly, Foy, I'm sure knows his way around the international recruiting as well, having come from the Italian leagues. And then I'm going to trust Steve Robinson's evaluation of tape.
Right.
I mean, this is the guy who's
right.
Carolina didn't miss often, and when they did, those guys transferred and were still pretty good players. Like, I'm guessing Dawson Garcia is going to be good at Minnesota. I trust the staff. Again, the biggest issue with international players, and this is true of domestic as well, is how do they transition not only to being on their own, being in college, but being in another country.
Right.
And a different style of game. And again, there's a big difference between high school ball, AAU ball, and college. But they've been running up against a lot of the same athletes.
Right.
Whereas a lot of these international guys have never faced some of these types of athletes. Now, they've gone against completely different types who might in many ways be better, older. But, you run into the kind of guys who go to Kentucky, and right now we're going to Arkansas and UCLA. those are elite athletes, and you don't always see that in Europe where you get elite basketball players who aren't dynamic athletes all the time, although that is changing. That is becoming more and more a thing of the past, but it's still true to an extent.
Brad, have I told you about the DraftKings Sportsbook app?
You've mentioned it repeatedly.
All right. But it might not be getting through to certain people. William Brad Allis is a very smart man, as is Sean Seeley, because they both went to Saguaro High School, both Saguaro grads. All right. For the people out there that didn't go to Saguaro, let me tell you about it. You put in $5, you get $150 in free plays. You got to bet on these NBA games, and you got to be a new customer. I like the Warriors to win, but it doesn't matter because the Warriors could lose by 500 points. And if you're a new customer, you get that $150. 21 and up, Arizona only. Gambling problem, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. They'll get you all taken care of. We're having Matt Muehlbach on tomorrow to talk about what makes Steve Kerr so great. Real quick, William, let me ask you about that since we're on the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Did you, when Steve Kerr, well, you're not quite that old, but, you were still present. Did Steve Kerr strike you as a guy that would get into the coaching game at some point? Right.
That was always the rumor because no one thought he'd play in the NBA.
Right. Yeah. True.
There were many people who, while he was a player, said he's going to be Luke's heir apparent.
Right.
And
you know who they also said that about?
A couple guys. Josh Pastner.
Before.
Who?
Kevin O'Neill.
Kevin O'Neill. Well, he was for an hour and a half.
Actually, he was. He did succeed, Lute.
He did. And he was named the coach in waiting. And then Lute, in the weirdest press conference in the history of put the kibosh on that without telling Jim Livengood he was putting the kibosh. He fired Kevin O'Neill at a press conference.
Correct.
It did help that Kevin O'Neill came in and basically did Lute a little dirty, though. I know he's your guy, but
yeah, I know. But you know what we got to call?
He ate from Crete. All
right. So Azuolas Tubelis, he gets from what's being reported, a wrist injury. Azuolas Tubelis, and I'm going to go back to the 1995-96 season here because, again, I think it's a decent comparison. Not great, but decent. Ben Davis emerged as that guy by about mid-season, especially when JB went out. I believe he was second to Sharif Abdur-Rahim in the Conference Player of the Year. Now, granted, you had other guys. You had Reggie. You had a younger Miles. You had some great role players in Corey and whatnot. But Ben Davis, and with Reggie to a lesser extent, were the faces of that team. Arizona needs Azuolas to be that guy. They need him to be right physically. They need him to be right mentally. This is obviously a setback, but I kind of feel, Brad, that this team will go as far as Azuolas Tubelis takes them next season.
Yeah, and he can take them far because there have been stretches in his 2-year career where he's been Arizona's best player.
Right.
Prior to the emergence of Mathurin 2 years ago,
right,
Tubelis was their best player. There were stretches last year where Tubelis was as good as Mathurin. Mathurin was more consistent. Mathurin has a higher upside. But prior to that injury, Tubelis was an all Pac-12 type performer. And he can be again. He's a guy who can be 17-9. Don't know if he will be. And again, we saw some troubling things at the end of the year. Again, I think a lot of that was injury related. But we'll see what he can do. But yeah, I'm optimistic that Tubelis can kind of rebound and have a very good junior year. I can't even keep these.
Yeah, he'll be a junior
classes now.
Technically, he could have 3 more.
Is he a sophomore too? I don't know. Sophomore, junior, whatever he is. Third-year player.
Right. Technically, he could have 3 more years if he wanted to. You're going to find a lot of those guys out there. So yeah, he needs to be that guy. And I think that, Pelle Larsson, let me ask you this, because I've asked you a lot about Kirk Kriisa and what your expectations are. Pelle, can you get, with the way that this roster is going to be constructed, and let's just say that you don't get a major contributor, a guy that, comes in and averages 17 a game, which you're probably not going to get. Can Pelle Larsson deliver you 12-5 while shooting good percentages and playing good defense? Can he up it to about 12 a game?
Yeah, I don't expect it. I think he feels more like a 10 guy.
Yeah.
9 or 10.
Right.
Because I still think he just seems to me the guy who's going to get incrementally better. And I kind of hope he's a guy who does stay to his 5th year. Because I think he can be a guy who maybe, again, I've made the comparison. They're very different players, but for some reason he reminds me of Judd Bushler. Mm-hmm. Just a guy who kind of does a little of everything, not to the extent of Dallin Terry, and who's just going to get a little bit better and a little bit better. And then maybe by his 5th year, you're looking up and he's an all Pac-12 type guy.
Right. So that's kind of what you're looking for, though. A guy that he gets it. He starts at 8. He gets to 10. He gets to 11 or 12, and then maybe by the time he's a senior, he's hitting 14 a game or something like that.
Now, if you tell me he's got a full healthy offseason, a full year at Arizona,
right?
A full year with the coaches, the weight staff, he doesn't have to worry about finding a new school, overcoming injury, then because maybe the guy we saw by the end of the year is the guy he could have been the whole year, in which case we are talking about the last month and a half of the season when he ended up winning Pac-12.
Pac-12 sixth man of the year.
Did he average something like 11 or 12 over that stretch?
That's why I came up with that number. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe he can. Again, we forget totality of the season and the reasons for things, and good and bad. We forget how good Hassan Adams was the first half of the year because we only remember what he was at the end of the year. But that happens a lot. So yeah, I could see scenarios where Pelle. Am I counting on it now? I think Pelle Larsson to me right now still feels like a role player who I think in an ideal world would still be coming off the bench and back again. A perfect, I think, fit would be get Ramey, get Kerr starts, Pelle comes off the bench.
All right, let's move over to football here in a second. But again, also want to tell you again, can't forget DraftKings Sportsbook app. Code word PHNX, put in $5, get $150 in free plays. As long as that game happens, that's all that has to happen. You got the Warriors, you got the Celtics coming up tomorrow. William, if you were going to bet anything with the DraftKings Sportsbook app, code word PHNX, who would you take tomorrow?
I think I would take the Warriors. Might hedge it with an under.
Real quick, I put this out on Twitter, and then we're going to get to Juve football. Can Steph reach Kobe heights if he wins another title?
No.
Or so? Never gets there?
He's not cool enough. He can be as a player.
Right. Well, that's what I'm asking you. I don't care about the icon.
Okay, then yes.
Right.
Again, I'm not a Kobe guy. People are going to hate me for this. But Kobe has a mystique, the Mamba mystique, which makes people overvalue him slightly. Again, is he a
great player, all-time great?
10? Yes. Is he top 5? Maybe. But it's the same reason people undervalue Duncan. Duncan's not cool.
Right.
Steph Curry is a weird mix of he's really cool till you turn to about 14.
For sure.
He's cool again when you're 25. He's because he's just not, he just doesn't have an edge. I think you have to have, I think it's part of the reason a lot of people do discount LeBron a little bit. LeBron doesn't have the Jordan smoked cigars, and played golf and gambled and trash talked, and LeBron tries to be the good guy and read the first page of the book over and over and over, and
that he's not actually reading. Yeah,
but, Kobe had the mystique. He had the Mamba mystique. He had, I think in a modern era, I think people would love Bill Russell. So I think, but if Steph Curry get another ring or two, and he's an all-time great.
Oh, well, that's where you go then. DraftKings Sportsbook app, code word PHNX. All right. Glenn Parker, who is kind of the embodiment of the example I'm going to bring up, mentioned this to me mentioned this probably about a month ago. He was on here, and obviously, if you're Arizona, you're ecstatic with the wide receiver, the quarterback recruiting. It doesn't get any better than the class that you brought in from a receiver perspective, maybe outside of Alabama or something, but it's a top 5 receiver class. You bring in Noah Fafita, you bring in a Pac-12 freshman of the year and Jaden DeLaura. Now, I asked Glenn, I said, so what's that next step? And he says, the next step is to be able to get those linemen. And he said, but you're not going to get the kids those 5 to 8 that are no brain guys, because they're all, and you covered the recruiting game forever. They're all going to the SEC. And if they're on the West Coast, they're probably going to go to USC, or they might go to Oregon. They're not coming here. But he says, you can find guys that have the build, that have the athleticism, and that's where it's on you to be able to coach them up. And I think you're going to see a lot of kids that kind of come in with the way that Arizona just got 2 commitments. From 2 linemen, both very athletic. And I think you're going to see that where you try to go for the 3-star kid, and by year 2 or 3, you have enough of them that you've got a couple guys that are good starters there.
Look at the Stoops era. They brought in a lot, and more so Rich Rod. Brought in a lot of 4-star guys.
Right.
The curse of the 4-star. Who's the only one who lived up to the hype? Evan Britton.
Right.
Some were not their fault.
Right.
You know, the big kid from State Bonaventure who had the concussion issues, but then you have the kid from Scottsdale who ends up getting arrested twice, and
Right.
Keenan Walker.
Keenan Walker. Yep.
Yeah, the kid from Hawaii, well regarded, ends up moving both sides of the ball. Solomon Kohler. In many ways, and this is a terrible attitude to have, there's a reason certain 4-stars don't go to USC. You look at the 2 linebackers Rich Rod brought in. And the one kid couldn't help that he tore his pec.
2 kids that could have gone to Oklahoma, but they ended up here. Yeah.
But there are others that, so what I think you have to is, you absolutely have to take a chance on them, but you have to trust your evaluations.
Right.
Dick Tomey did 2 things really well 3 really with his offensive line.
Right.
1, he mined the JCs.
Right.
He did not miss often on JC offensive linemen.
Right.
2, he was really good with the Polynesian players. And sometimes that was the same guy. You know, he had that little pipeline there through some of the JCs in Utah. He also went small town. Warner Smith, San Manuel.
Right.
Teddy Bruschi, Roseville.
Right.
Waldrop was a relative. I mean, I know he's LA area, but he was a smaller school.
Waldrop was a Phoenix kid.
That's right. I'm thinking Ty Park.
William, I'm in your wheelhouse right here.
Yeah. So, but if you look at it, he didn't miss much. And what he did is he found these little niches. So, we all hate necessarily, because recruiting is really fun looking at stars and ranking, but maybe sometimes you got to go to Carlsbad, New Mexico, and find a freak athlete.
Right.
And they tried it.
Gonzalez is a great name, by the way.
Yeah. So, and I don't know if the kid's going to be good, but as I have often said, you take a chance on 6'6", 250 wildly athletic more than you do at 5'8", 140 wildly athletic, which Rich Rod did all the time.
Right.
Sometimes it doesn't pay off. The kid, I don't know if the kid from Germany is going to work out for Arizona. Probably not by now. But I'd rather take a chance, bring in 2 mini linemen, so Jordan Morgan's a guy who was a little under the radar. I know he ended up with the USC offer, but take a chance on those guys. So I have no problem with that. The kid out of the LA kid they got, Conti, I believe it is.
Conti.
He's got the size, got the frame, looks like a guy who can put on some weight, play some ball. He had legit offers. He's a 3-star, but he's from a good program, Corona Centennial, which is one of the best on the West Coast. So that's the perfect guy you take a chance on. Just like I like the kid they picked up over the summer from a big, Long Beach Poly kid. Who happened to be 340 pounds or whatever.
Right.
Do you either need slightly undersized and athletic, or you need slightly oversized and I got to get you into shape? But that's fine. And if you can add 1 or 2 4-stars into that mix every couple of years, great. But you've got to bolster these lines, because we've had, especially on the defensive side of the ball, defensive line issues since Tony left, to be frank.
And I think that people also need to understand a little bit that Arizona could easily have his impact. Now, it's not going to quite have the numbers, but Arizona could easily have this impactful 2023 class that isn't rated as high, because you're going a heavy line on both sides. And again, like we talked about, you're not going to necessarily get those 5 or those 4-star kids, but it could, as long as it's littered with 3-star kids that have offers to, your UCLAs, your Oklahoma States, schools like that, then I'm cool with it. Then it's up to the coaches to be able to coach those dudes up.
Give me some Colin Baxters, give me some Joe Longacres, give me, those type of guys.
Right, for sure.
And I'll be more than ever. Or Ricky Elmore. Yes, Brooks Reed. Bring in guys. And that's, again, why I like the kid from New Mexico. Again, you can't have a whole class of that.
Right.
But that's a kid who has 4 position possibility.
Right.
He could be O-line, he could be interior D-line, he could be D-end, or he could be a tight end. I don't know. But that was Brooks Reed. I mean, he came in as an H-back, became a tight end, then became a D-end.
Right.
If you go, I don't mind the bottom 3 or 4 guys in the class being these guys you reach for, but it can't be your whole class, which is what sometimes Rich Rod did, which is a lot of times what Sumlin was trying to do.
Right.
So you got to be conservative with that. But you also can't freak out and write it as an indictment of recruiting because you're taking a flyer on a kid. Because all it takes is that kid going to one camp or combine this summer, which he probably now won't have to do, and he blows up. And suddenly you look like a genius or you look like an idiot because you didn't offer him early enough.
He's William Brad Alice. I'm merely Mike Luke. All right, William, give the people a little bit of an update on what's going on. You're coaching All-Stars, I believe, right?
I'm helping out. Yeah, I'm not on the main coaching staff because you can only have 3 in the dugout. But, yeah, my son Tyler's playing 12 and under All-Stars for Flowing Wells Little League. We scrimmaged Western last night. Western, I'm pretty sure their starting pitcher came with his wife and kids.
Has like the mustache, the handlebar.
No. He was about 5'9".
Right. Okay.
Apparently he and his twin brother, one of the coaches knows them. They're football players too. The little brother's actually going to the little twin. He's shorter, playing at Texas Stadium this weekend in an 11-on-11 tournament. I didn't even know they had those things, but good on them. Yeah, the daughter's playing a little volleyball. I'm doing both, and I'm coaching both in between. So very busy still. But the podcast is back. I recorded an episode earlier. It should be up tonight or tomorrow morning, talking a little Chip Hale, talking a little Caitlin Lowe, and a little bit about the football recruiting. We'll have a basketball one later in the week as well. So it should be back. The little hiatus is over now that I'm only busy, 5 nights a week.
You're only doing 20 different things now as opposed to 35.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
He's Brad Alice. I'm Mike Luke. Thanks so much. We'll be back with you tomorrow at 12:30. We're going to have Matt Muehlbach on. You've been listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast.